Estongo. I'm honored to speak with you today about August 7th, 1856, and what this day means to us as Seminole people. Every year at this time, the Seminole Nation of Oklahoma recognizes today as our Independence Day. This day is so important, it reflects in our Seminole Nation codes of laws. The descendants of our Seminole forefathers, in recognition and honor of their valiant achievement to perpetuate our sovereignty, for the posterity do hereby sanction a day of recognition annually on August 7th as our official Seminole Nation Independence Day. Over the years, forces outside the nation have challenged our sovereignty. But as we know, the recent decision by the U.S. Supreme Court and subsequent events shows us how important it is for us to draw on the wisdom of those who came before us to protect one of the most important ingredients of our very existence. It's our nation's sovereignty. We must be willing to proceed with caution, read the signs, work our way through every situation with great care, and even when everyone around us is in a hurry. Today we stand strong and resilient as Seminole people. We continue to nurture the everlasting fire on this, our Independence Day. Mado.
Today we are observing the Treaty of 1856 that happened on August 7th, where we claimed our independence from the Creek Nations and became a prosperous tribe, protecting our sovereignty and being identified as Seminoles. Independence Day has been going on for many years. It's been observed by founding members Dwayne Miller, Jackie Rolito, Rodney Factor, and Lewis Johnson, and many others. Even though we are in a pandemic, we would like to not let that overshadow the strength of our people.
As our people were brought west in chains as prisoners of war, they were guaranteed a separate land for themselves and for their people. That didn't happen. It took about 20 years before they were granted that promise. They stayed in an area of the Cherokee country. The Cherokees helped for a time and helped them, but our people continued to suffer. What they were looking for and wanted to guarantee is their own identity, their own sovereignty. There was a lot of times when there was no food, the government tried to force them to move into the Creek country. Still yet our people held out for one thing, for their own separate identity of who they were, and that's how we are today. As our people continue to resist moving in with the Creeks and coming under the Creek domain, our leaders continue to have conversations with the federal government and demanding that they be given their own territory, their own lands, and finally that happened in 1856. That's why we're here today, commemorating that time, struggle of our ancestors, the things that they went through so that we might maintain our own identity and live as a separate people.
We are here today to observe something that's very important in the history of the Seminole Nation, and that is the time where we claimed our independence. You see, the Seminoles struggled to survive, not only in the areas of Florida during 3 separate Indian wars, but they also struggled once that they received their area here in the West, because it wasn't something that they received of their very own simply because they were to be placed under the authority of the Muskogee Creek Nation. That was something that was very hard to accept for the Seminoles. because what they understood when they were being brought from Florida here to the West was that they were going to have lands of their own. They were going to be able to exercise their own self-sufficiency and to create laws of their own and to be an independent people of which they were used to being while they were in Florida. But the steadfastness of the leaders of the Seminoles, one being John Jumper, he continued to make the case for the Seminoles that the conditions that they were living under was not acceptable, and that how could their people truly begin to advance in this new country that they were in unless they had their own independence and had their own lands that they could call their own. For you see, they didn't want to operate under the laws of the Creek Nation. They knew they would never be able to live totally as a free people unless one day they could obtain lands of their own. John Jumper was a large man, 6'4" and over 250 pounds, but a man who carried not only a large stature but a large heart for his people. He spoke to the sub-agent, who was known as Washburn at that time, and shared many times that the Seminole Nation could not continue on in the same circumstances and situation that they were placed in. And because of this, there began to be a real talk about the Seminoles possibly separating out from the jurisdiction of the Muscogee Creek Nation. So the idea was the Seminoles were outnumbered at that time. The Creek Nation was estimated to be about 25,000 citizens. Seminoles at that time was about 2,500. The original thoughts of the Seminoles from the beginning was that they were told if they came to the West they would have lands of their own. The government began to think on a couple of things. They wanted to be able to get all Seminoles out of Florida if all possible. So they began to agree that yes, the Seminoles needed land of their own, so therefore within the articles of the 1856 treaty, there was provisions for the remaining Seminoles that were in Florida to come to the Indian Territory and join the Seminoles in the West. Billy Bowlegs had not yet came west at that point in history. Probably one of the most talked about items in that treaty was the land base. It really truly started around what we call around Potawatomi County line, somewhere around where Tecumseh is, Shawnee, Asher, Oklahoma, those places like that. From there, between the two rivers, all the way to the Texas border, was the lands between the two rivers was the Seminole domain. 2,169,080 acres was what the amount of the land was. Seminoles began to live after the signing of the 1856 treaty with more freedoms and exercise the sovereignty that they hoped for. They were no longer under the National Council of the Muscogee Creek Nation, and therefore they could thrive as an independent people. But the 1856 treaty, along with the significance of it, can never be forgotten. It is what truly gave our first lands west of the Mississippi to the Seminole Nation. And as long as it's in tribal law, even after we all leave this walks of life, it should continue to be observed, continue to be remembered, what our people went through to obtain the independence of their own in the West.